My name is Lawrence. I am 62 years old, and until last Sunday, I still believed in the power of gathering. You know, that age old idea that if you bring people together, feed them, make the air thick with grilled onions and old stories, something will stick. Love, maybe, gratitude, family. I suppose I still believe in those things, but now I know they are not guaranteed. They are fragile, conditional, easily chipped away by indifference, by resentment disguised as manners, and by words said just low enough to wound without being caught. Every summer for the last 15 years, I've hosted a family picnic at our lake house in Windermere County. That little place, white shutters, wraparound porch, creaky wooden floorboards that groan like tired knees. It was where Brennan took his first steps, where he caught his first fish, where his father and I used to sit on the swing after long school years, our fingers tangled, saying nothing. I still keep the porch swing oiled, though no one ever sits on it with me anymore. Last Sunday, I woke at 6:30 a.m., a little earlier than usual. Excitement, I thought. I shuffled into the kitchen, barefoot, the floor cool against my soles. The morning sun was beginning to bleed through the curtains, dust floating like golden glitter in the air. I cracked the window open for the breeze and got to work. Potato salad, chicken skewers, lemon poppy seed cake. I even made deviled eggs the way Brennan liked, with just a hint of paprika and extra mustard. There's a rhythm to preparing love like this. A kind of quiet song you hum to yourself while slicing watermelon or laying out paper napkins. I didn't hum that day, though. Maybe something deep down already knew. By 10, the coolers were packed, and I'd already placed the folding chairs beneath the big willow near the lake's edge. I added yellow cushions for comfort. Sylvia gets fussy if there's no back support. Sylvia, my daughter-in-law of 7 years. Thin, pretty, and always tight-lipped unless she's talking about Pilates or her skincare routine. From the moment Brennan introduced her, I knew she was never going to see me as anything more than Brennan's widowed mother, the accessory that came with the mortgage. Still, I tried. I always tried. I bought her favorite wine. I complimented her when she changed her hair. I ignored the sighs she gave when I mentioned things Brennan liked as a child. I swallowed so much pride I sometimes wondered if I'd choke on it. Guests arrived in waves. My niece Marcy, with her unruly twins, Fern, my best friend and eternal gossip, brought her infamous lemon bars. The twins ran wild, shrieking and sticky-fingered. The lake shimmered in the heat, and everything on the surface looked like a picture of contentment. By 1:30, Brennan still hadn't arrived. Sylvia pulled up alone, hair slicked back in that severe bun she favors, dressed in white linen like she was headed to brunch in the Hamptons, not a lakeside potluck. She gave me a peck on the cheek, dry, cold, and murmured something about Brennan being delayed at work. I nodded. I didn't ask questions. I never do anymore. She sauntered over to Fern's daughter, Casey, and they began chatting. I busied myself with setting out the condiments, refilling the drink station. I was reaching for a jar of pickles when I heard it, clear as if it had been shouted. Sylvia's voice, low but unmistakable. She's a parasite, just lives off us and pretends she's helping. Brennan and I can't breathe. That house? It should be ours by now. She ruined everything. Casey gave a startled laugh, but Sylvia just sipped her wine and smiled like she'd said something amusing. My hand slipped. The jar of pickles thudded onto the table, mercifully unbroken, but the noise turned a few heads. I smiled, nodded, carried on, but inside, something cracked. Not snapped. Cracked, like a frozen pond in early spring. Dangerous, silent. I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe properly. I just walked, past the willow tree, past the edge of the lawn, to the dock. I sat there and stared at the lake, while the laughter of people I loved became white noise. Sylvia didn't know. Or maybe she did, and didn't care. But I am not a parasite. I am the reason they have that house. When Brennan lost his job 5 years ago, I told him to move in with me. I insisted. I used my pension, my savings, even refinanced the lake house so they wouldn't lose theirs. The mortgage? It's in my name. The bills? I pay them. Quietly, without ceremony. I thought I was helping. I thought I was preserving family, supporting them until they found their feet again. But now I see I was just enabling their ingratitude. I waited on that dock for Brennan to come and find me, to say, "Mom, I'm so sorry," to tell me Sylvia was just having a bad day, that she didn't mean it, that he didn't agree. But the apology never came. In fact, no one came, not even to check if I'd fallen in the water. When the sun dipped low and the laughter began to wane, I slipped away. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't take my Tupperware. I just drove back to the house I paid for, alone. I slept on the couch that night, though my bed was made. The silence rang in my ears, and the taste of betrayal coated my tongue like bile. I kept waiting. Monday, Tuesday, no call, no text. Brennan didn't come by. Sylvia certainly didn't. My heart kept flickering like a dying candle, hoping for the warmth of their love to relight it. It never came. On Wednesday morning, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror and looked at the woman staring back at me. Same face, same gray-streaked hair, but her eyes looked different. Sharper, wiser, angry, and maybe, just maybe, ready. The morning after the picnic, the world was silent in a way that felt intentional, like it was daring me to break. I sat at the kitchen table, staring into a cold cup of tea I'd made and forgotten about. Outside, the wind pushed through the trees like a whisper I couldn't quite catch. And inside me, there was a pressure I hadn't known before. A tightening, a stillness, a cold, calculating quiet. I looked around the room, the soft yellow wallpaper Dylan had picked, the same battered cupboards we'd painted together during that one summer we couldn't afford a real vacation. He'd always said this kitchen was the heart of our home. But now, sitting there alone, the heart felt stopped. I reached up to the top of the cupboard where I kept a weathered leather binder. In it were the documents of my life. Marriage certificate, Brennan's birth announcement, property deeds, utility bills. A letter from Dylan tucked between the pages like a bookmark. In case something ever happens, I want you to know, none of this mattered without you. My hands trembled slightly as I flipped through the binder, through memories printed in ink and numbers. There it was, the mortgage agreement. The refinance paperwork from 5 years ago when Brennan lost his job and they'd nearly lost their home. I remembered it clearly, how Sylvia hadn't even come to the meeting at the bank. "She's too stressed," Brennan had said. So I signed everything, put the property in my name, paid off the outstanding debt, and told them not to worry. But they had worried. About me, apparently. A parasite, she'd called me. I pulled out the bank statements, line after line, groceries, electric bills, school supplies for Toby, even a subscription to a yoga app Sylvia had asked me to sign up for, and just add to the house card. I remembered thinking, it's fine. I want to help. But now I wondered if every single moment of generosity had been a notch in the stick they used to beat me with. Later that afternoon, I found myself in the living room, staring at the dusty bookshelf. I reached up and pulled out the old wedding album, cream-colored, fabric-bound, a little frayed at the corners. Dylan had loved this album. He used to say it was our Bible of beginnings. I opened it slowly. Page 1, the engagement photo. I looked so young I barely recognized myself. My hair was dark then, my eyes bright. Dylan stood beside me, taller, always a little slouched like he was trying to be less intimidating. He had a dimple that never left him, even when he was angry. Especially then. Page 2, our wedding day. I wore a borrowed veil. My mother's brooch was pinned to my dress. We didn't have much, but we had laughter. Dylan had whispered something wildly inappropriate just as the priest asked if I would take this man, and I'd laughed so hard I nearly missed the cue to say yes. I touched the photograph like it was a wound. For the first time in decades, I asked myself something I never dared before. Was this family worth the sacrifices? Was Brennan, my only son, worth the years I spent stitching a life together with bare hands and sheer will? I thought about all the times I'd swallowed my pride. About the clothes I never bought, the vacations I canceled, the dreams I packed in a box labeled later. Later never came. 3 days passed in silence. No knock on the door, no message, no apology. Until Friday afternoon, when my phone rang. Brennan. I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the button. I wanted to believe this was the moment he'd make it right, that some part of the little boy who used to run to me when he scraped his knee still lived inside that man. I answered. Hello? Hey, Mom, he said breezily. You busy? His voice, so casual, so unaffected. No, I said. What is it? Cool. So, Sylvia's been thinking, and we feel like we should all sit down, talk things out. I straightened in my chair. You want to talk? Yeah, because the way you left the picnic, it was kind of dramatic, don't you think? I blinked. I left because your wife called me a parasite. He laughed. Actually laughed. Oh, come on. She didn't mean it like that. I heard her say it. Yeah, well, she was venting. We're under a lot of pressure. And to be fair, there's some truth in what she said. I froze. Excuse me? He sighed, annoyed now. Mom, look, I know you think you're helping, but sometimes it doesn't feel like that. You're still holding the mortgage. It's weird. We're adults living in your house like we're teenagers. We feel stuck. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Brennan, I pay your bills. I feed your child. That house would be gone without me, and we're grateful for that, he said, as if I was the one being unreasonable. But money doesn't give you a license to control everything. Sylv and I want to live, really live. I bit the inside of my cheek until I tasted blood. And actually, he added, we were wondering if you could help us out one more time. Just a quick $5,000. Sylv's launching her online boutique, and we're a little short after paying off the credit card last month. He waited. I didn't speak. You there? He prompted. Do you even hear yourself? I said finally. He sighed again. It's always drama with you lately. Look, if you don't want to help, just say so. No need to guilt trip me. No, I said. I don't want to help. Silence. Wow, he muttered. Okay, fine. I guess we know where we stand. And then, as if I were the one burning the bridge, he hung up. I sat there for a long time after that, the phone still in my hand, my reflection staring back at me in the darkened window. Where had my son gone? When had he learned to see me not as a person, but as a resource? No one prepared me for this part of motherhood. The part where you give everything, absolutely everything, and one day realize the people you love most have come to expect it. Not appreciate it. Expect it. That night, I made dinner for one and left the dishes in the sink. Something in me had changed. Something had died, and something else had begun to wake. It began like most of my mornings do, quietly with a cup of tea I never quite finish. But that morning was different. There was a weight on my chest I couldn't name yet. Not sadness, not exactly anger. More like the heaviness that comes when you realize something has been broken for a very long time, and you were the only one trying to hold it together. I stood at the kitchen sink, watching the wind bend the trees outside. The lake shimmered in the distance like nothing had changed. But inside me, everything had shifted. I felt raw, like a blister finally burst, and now the skin was open to air, to truth, to pain. The echo of Brennan's voice wouldn't leave me. Just 5,000. Like it was nothing. Like I was an ATM he didn't need to thank. Just punch in the code. guilt, and take what he needed. I sat at the dining table with my tea going cold and pulled the big brown accordion folder from the drawer beside the china cabinet. I'd started storing receipts years ago. At first, it was practical, just to keep track. Then it became a habit. And lately, it had begun to feel like evidence. Evidence that I mattered only as far as I could provide. I laid the receipts out on the table in neat lines like soldiers awaiting inspection. The car, the first one. I remember Brennan calling, frantic. Sylvia was 6 months pregnant. Their old sedan had died. "We can't afford another," he'd said, his voice cracking. "We need something safe for the baby." I wired them $8,400 the next day. No questions asked. The medical bills, Toby's surgeries. I still remember the smell of antiseptic in that waiting room. Sylvia never came. She said she couldn't handle hospitals. I sat with Brennan, brought sandwiches, paid the out-of-pocket balance with my savings. That was nearly $12,000. Preschool for Nora. "Montessori is the best," Sylvia had insisted. "It's just $1,100 a month." When I hesitated, Brennan said, "Come on, Mom. Don't you want what's best for your granddaughter?" Then came the extras. Piano lessons, dance costumes, soccer uniforms, camp registration fees, birthday parties with bouncy castles and catered cupcakes, school fundraisers, ballet recitals, Sylv's yoga classes, Brennan's gym membership. All temporary help, all just for now. The paper trail was endless. I totaled it all, $98,342.67. And those were just the things I had receipts for. I sat back, stunned. My hands were trembling, not from age, not from weakness, but from the kind of grief that doesn't come from loss, the kind that comes from realization. I was never thanked. Not really. No wide-eyed astonishment. No. "Mom, are you sure?" No. "We'll pay you back." Just a vague, "Thanks. You're a lifesaver," as Brennan hugged me with one arm while scrolling through his phone. They didn't see it as generosity. They saw it as duty. They didn't see me as a person. They saw me as a resource. I stood up, too fast. My knee throbbed. The surgery I'd put off because Brennan needed a new transmission. I limped to the living room and sat in my favorite chair, the one Dylan gave me on our 30th anniversary. I reached for the wedding album again. Dylan's smile. My smile. I was thinner then, lighter. I could almost remember what hope felt like. We had dreams. We wanted to travel once Brennan was grown. We'd saved for years for a trip to Tuscany, but life got in the way. Brennan's college, Dylan's diagnosis, Sylvia's bed rest, more bills, more sacrifice. I never thought I was buying love. I thought I was building a family. But now, I wasn't sure what I'd built anymore. The phone rang. Brennan. I let it go to voicemail. Twice. The third time, I answered. "Hey, Mom," he said, sounding annoyed rather than apologetic. "You busy?" "No," I said. "What is it?" "You're not still upset, are you?" he asked, as if I were pouting over spilled milk. Look, I talked to Sylv. She didn't mean what she said. She called me a parasite. She was just venting. We've been under a lot of pressure. "You didn't deny it, Brennan," I said. "You agreed with her." "Well," he paused. "Some things she said weren't wrong. I mean, Mom, it's kind of weird still living under your roof. It feels like we're not really in control of our own lives." "My name is on the deed because you couldn't make the payments." "Exactly. So it's not really ours." "Don't you see how that feels?" he asked, his voice taking on that tone, half rational, half manipulation. "Like we're trapped." "You're not trapped," I said coldly. "You're cushioned." He chuckled bitterly. "Wow. So now you're resentful? That's rich." "I'm thinking," I said calmly, "and I need time." "To think about helping your own son?" To think about why I keep being expected to do it." That caught him off guard. He hesitated. Mom, come on. We've always leaned on you. You're the steady one. You said you wanted to help. I did want to, I said. I did. But wanting to help is different from being expected to. Jesus, he muttered. It's just 5,000. You've got more than that in savings. And that's my savings, Brennan. For my life, my needs, my future. Your future, he laughed. You're 62. I froze. That's right, he added quickly. I didn't mean it like that. But you did, I said. You meant I don't matter anymore. No, Mom, look, you're twisting everything. I'm not giving you the money, I said flatly. Not now. Maybe not ever. There was a long pause. Then his voice changed. Cold. Calculated. Wow. After everything we've done to include you? Include me? I laughed, but it didn't sound like joy. You mean tolerate me. Fine, he snapped. Do what you want, but don't expect us to keep coming around if this is how you're going to act. And just like that, my son, my baby boy, hung up. I stared at the phone. There it was. The truth. My presence was conditional. My value had always been tied to what I could give, and I was finally done giving. The truth didn't come like a thunderclap. It came as a knock at the door. 3 sharp taps. No hesitation. I was still in my robe, gray flannel, a little too long in the sleeves. I hadn't brushed my hair or made anything more ambitious than a lukewarm cup of tea. The house was quiet, but inside me there was a storm building, a whisper that had started days ago and was now humming at the base of my throat. I opened the door. About damn time, Dora said. She stood on the porch like she'd been summoned by divine intervention, or maybe just gossip. My oldest friend, my truest one. Wavy gray hair beneath her floppy hat, a tray of lattes in one hand and a bag of croissants swinging from the other, sunglasses perched low on her nose. Without waiting for an invitation, she breezed inside. I brought sustenance, she said, placing the lattes and the bag on the kitchen table. And I brought bluntness. Pick your poison. I stood there, still barefoot, still speechless. Fern told me, she continued, settling into a chair. The picnic, the walkout, the parasite comment, and that your golden boy didn't even try to apologize. I finally sat down across from her. He asked me for $5,000, I said. Dora blinked. Did he ask before or after the insult? After. She leaned back and let out a low whistle. God, I wish I were surprised. I stared at the chipped mug in front of me. I don't know what to do, Dora. Yes, you do, she said gently. You just don't want to admit it. I said nothing. She slid the latte toward me. Start here. Drink. Then we dismantle your codependency, one croissant at a time. I managed a weak smile, took a sip. The foam hit my lip just right, warm and soft, like comfort disguised as caffeine. I keep asking myself, I said, how we got here. Brennan used to be so good. He was kind. He never talked back. He used to bring me flowers from the neighbor's garden and cry when I scraped my knees. Dora nodded, listening. And now? My voice cracked. Now he talks to me like I'm an obligation, like I'm a line item on his budget, not a person. Because to him, she said softly, you aren't. I flinched. I don't say that to be cruel, Lawrence. I say it because someone has to. He doesn't see you as a mother anymore. He sees you as a provider. And Sylvia, she sees you as competition. She's never liked me, I murmured. She resents you, Dora said bluntly, because you're the only thing keeping them afloat, and deep down she hates needing you. So she punishes you by pretending you're a parasite. It makes her feel powerful. I pressed my fingers to my temples. Maybe I created this. Maybe I gave too much. No, Dora said. You gave what you had, out of love, out of fear, out of guilt. But what matters now is that you see it. She paused. You see it now, don't you? I nodded slowly. I do. Dora reached into her tote bag and pulled out a legal pad. Then let's make it real. Let's put it on paper. What? Everything you've spent, everything they've asked for, every dime, every favor, every sacrificed vacation and canceled doctor appointment, all of it. I hesitated. I already have a folder, I whispered, with receipts. She raised an eyebrow. Of course you do. I retrieved the brown accordion file from the cabinet. It was heavier than I remembered, like it had absorbed all the shame I'd been carrying. We opened it on the table and began to sort. There was the invoice for Toby's preschool, the PayPal confirmation for Nora's gymnastics camp, the auto repair bill from when Brennan had crashed the SUV I'd bought them, Sylvia's boutique expenses, website hosting, marketing packages, custom boxes, and the cash I'd given Brennan last year for a surprise anniversary trip, only to find out later it went toward credit card debt. Together, we started writing numbers down. Do you remember how much you paid for their second car? Dora asked. $9,000, I said. And the mortgage payments you covered? $800 a month for 3.5 years. She did the math. That's $33,600 right there. Add $12,000 for medical bills. Another $7,200 in utilities. What about food? Groceries you paid for when they forgot their wallet. Too many to count. We rounded it all up. $168,000, Dora said, and I'm being conservative. I sat back, stunned. That's nearly a decade of your life, she said softly. And do you know what the return on investment has been? I didn't answer. They've guilted you, disrespected you, and cut you out emotionally. You've paid for everything, and the price wasn't just financial. It was your self-worth. Tears welled in my eyes. I wanted them to have a better life, I said. Better than I did. But what about your life, Lawrence? Dora asked. When do you get one? I couldn't speak. I'm going to say something, and I need you to really hear me, she said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. You deserve better than this. You deserve more than crumbs from a table you built. That broke me. The sob came out sharp and sudden, like something unlatched inside me. I cried. Ugly, gasping tears I didn't even know I'd been holding back. Dora held my hand and didn't let go. You've given them everything, she whispered. Now it's time to give something back to yourself. When the storm of tears passed, I wiped my face and looked at the stack of papers in front of me. Cold, hard proof. This ends now, I said. Dora smiled. There she is. Thursday started like any other day in the quiet rhythm of my post-retirement life. I made my tea, watered the potted violets on the windowsill, and sat at the table, still caught in the undertow of the last few weeks. The betrayal, the numbers, the silence. It had all settled on my chest like dust in a forgotten room. By mid-morning, I decided to go into town. Not because I needed groceries, but because I needed to feel something other than the inside of my house. I needed to be around people who didn't see me as a bank account with a heartbeat. I chose Cardin's Market, not the big store, the smaller one. Local. Familiar. It still smelled like wax paper and old wood, like a place where stories were told between aisles. I wandered slowly, touching items without really seeing them, until I heard her voice. Sylvia. At first, I wasn't sure. I ducked behind the tower of summer pool floats and peered across the aisle. There she was, standing near the seasonal items, bikinis and sunscreen and plastic flamingos, wearing oversized sunglasses and a pale linen dress, talking animatedly into her phone. She didn't see me. She didn't lower her voice. No, Miguel, she said with a little laugh. We want the excavation done by next week. Otherwise, the whole schedule's off. Brennan's mom promised she'd wire the $5,000 before the weekend. I froze. Yeah, she continued, flipping through a brochure. Pool, built-in spa, the fire pit. We're going all out. It's going to be stunning. Toby's birthday is going to blow the neighbors' minds. Another pause, another laugh. Oh, don't worry, she said. She always caves, just needs a few days to feel like she's being thoughtful. It's pathetic, really. I couldn't move. I couldn't blink. She wasn't talking about a family emergency, or groceries, or a loan to keep them from defaulting. She was planning a swimming pool, a luxury, funded by me. I dropped the carton of milk I'd been holding. It hit the floor with a dull thud, splitting open slightly and leaking into a small white puddle. Sylvia turned her head. Our eyes met. For a fraction of a second, she froze. Then her face reset into something artificial. She waved, smiled too brightly, and turned away without even ending her call. I didn't pick up the milk. I left it there. I walked out of that store and straight to my car. My hands were shaking as I gripped the wheel. The entire ride home, one word echoed in my mind. Used. That's what I was. That's all I had been to them. A resource, a loophole, a walking checkbook. They weren't struggling. They were strategizing, manipulating, lying, and laughing about it while they built a luxury swimming pool. When I got home, I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I didn't call Brennan. I went to the cabinet, retrieved the deed to the house, and opened the folder like it was a lifeline. There it was. My name. Not Brennan's, not Sylvia's. Mine. 5 years ago, I'd refinanced it to save them, and I had never asked for a penny back. I sat down and stared at the paper until my eyes burned. Later that afternoon, I called Dora. I want to talk to a lawyer, I told her. She didn't ask why, she just said, I'm driving. The next morning, we met at the law office of Dennis Cole. The reception area smelled faintly of lemon and old files. The receptionist smiled politely as she ushered us into a wood-paneled office where Dennis sat behind a cluttered desk. He had kind eyes, thinning gray hair, and the air of someone who'd seen 1,000 families come apart in that very room. I need to know my rights, I said, handing him the folder. He read through the deed, the refinance documents, the mortgage payment stubs. He asked a few clarifying questions. Then he looked up. Legally, he said, you're the sole owner of the property. That means you have full authority to sell it, gift it, or transfer it. Your son and daughter-in-law have no legal claim unless they've been making formal payments or have a written agreement, which I don't see here. They don't, I said flatly. I pay the mortgage, I pay the bills. Dennis nodded. Then yes, you're well within your rights to put the property on the market. You can give them notice to vacate once you've accepted an offer, and if they don't comply, we begin formal eviction. It's not pleasant, but it's lawful. Dora touched my arm. You okay? I nodded slowly. I think I am. Dennis leaned forward. If I may, this isn't just about legality. This is about boundaries. You've supported them for years, but if they're not grateful, if they're deceiving you, it's fair to say the arrangement no longer serves you. It never really did, I whispered. He nodded. We can begin the process today. I can draw up a listing agreement, contact a real estate agent I trust, and file a notice of intent. From there, it's up to you how quickly we move. I agreed. The papers were signed by lunchtime. As Dora and I walked back to the car, she asked, Do you want to tell them first? No, I said. They made their plans without telling me. I'll return the favor. That night, I sat on the porch swing Dylan built. The breeze off the lake smelled like pine and earth and something new. I didn't cry. I didn't doubt. I watched the stars come out one by one and whispered, Thank you. Not to them, to myself, for finally saying enough. Let me know when you're ready. I didn't sleep the night before. Not much, anyway. I kept turning the words over in my head, how I'd say it, what they'd say back, how it might fall apart the second Sylvia's eyes narrowed or Brennan's voice caught with guilt. I imagined 100 versions of what might happen when I told them the truth. and none of them felt as terrifying as the silence that had followed me around the house all day. By 5 o'clock, the roast was in the oven. The table was set with care, with a kind of aching finality. White linen napkins, wine glasses that hadn't seen use in years, Dylan's favorite serving platter. The sun spilled through the windows in that soft gold of early evening, bathing everything in false comfort. At 6:02, I heard the crunch of tires on gravel. They didn't knock. Of course they didn't. They let themselves in, chatting about a new patio heater they'd seen online. Sylvia's heels clicked against the hardwood as she glanced around the kitchen. "Smells nice," she said, with a smile as thin as paper. Brennan followed her, hands in his pockets, nervous. "Hey, Mom." I nodded, wiping my hands on a towel. "Hope you're hungry," I said, gesturing toward the dining room. "Come in." They sat at the table like royalty summoned to a feast. Sylvia reached for the wine glass without hesitation. Brennan watched me carefully, like he already sensed this was no ordinary dinner. I took my seat. The thick brown folder lay on the table between us. "I'm glad you both came," I said. "Before we eat, I need to talk to you." Sylvia rolled her eyes. "If this is about the money, we've already discussed it." "It's not about the money," I interrupted gently, though my voice cut through the room like a blade. "It's about the truth." I opened the folder and spread the papers across the table, a visual timeline of every sacrifice I'd made, every dollar I'd spent, every decision I'd carried quietly on my back while they lived their curated little lives. "These are the expenses," I said. 10 years' worth. Mortgage payments, grocery bills, school fees, car repairs, medical costs, business loans, gifts, necessities, luxuries. Brennan's face turned pale as he reached for one of the documents. Sylvia glanced at it, unimpressed. "What is this supposed to prove?" "That I've given you more than any mother should have to," I said. Without resentment, without demand. Until now. I passed them each a summary page. It bore one number, $168,000. Sylvia scoffed. "This is ridiculous. Who tracks this stuff? It's creepy, honestly." "I didn't track it for revenge," I said. "I tracked it to remind myself that I am not invisible." Brennan looked up, eyes glassy. "Mom, we didn't know it was that much." "That's the problem," I said quietly. "You never asked. You never thought to ask." I reached for the final document, a clean sheet of legal paper with a single sentence typed at the top. "I've paid off the mortgage," I said, "and I'm putting the house up for sale." The room went still. Sylvia's fork clattered to the floor. "You're what?" I repeated it, slowly, clearly, without trembling. "I'm selling the house. I've spoken to a lawyer, I've begun the paperwork, and I've contacted an agent. This home, which has given you shelter and security and comfort for a decade, is no longer yours to use." Sylvia shot to her feet. "You can't be serious." "I've never been more serious," I said, remaining seated. Brennan looked stunned. "But where will we go?" "You'll find your way," I said. "You're grown adults. You have degrees, skills, ambition. You'll figure it out." Sylvia's voice went shrill. "You can't just throw us out. We have kids. This is their home." "It was never your home," I said. "It was mine, paid for with my money, my time, my broken body, and worn-out savings. You've lived here rent-free for years while I paid every bill. And when I asked for respect, you gave me mockery. When I gave you trust, you gave me lies." Sylvia slammed her glass down. "This is abusive." "No," I said calmly. "This is a boundary." Brennan stood, voice cracking. "Mom, please, let's not do this. Don't make a decision you'll regret." I looked at him. My son, my boy, the child I once rocked through fevers and nightmares. "I regret," I said softly, "not doing this years ago." He sat back down slowly, face drawn. "I'm not leaving you with nothing," I continued. You'll receive 20% of the sale proceeds. That's generous, considering I've already given you more than any contract could require. Sylvia laughed bitterly. 20%? After everything? After everything, I confirmed. It's enough for a down payment, a fresh start. I suggest you use it wisely. Unbelievable, she muttered, grabbing her purse. Brennan didn't move. His eyes stayed on the papers in front of him, like they were holy texts he'd finally been forced to read. You always said family was everything? He whispered. I meant it, I replied. But family doesn't drain you until you're empty. Family doesn't take and take until there's nothing left but silence. Sylvia pulled him up by the arm. We're done here. No, I said, standing. I'm done. They left without another word. No hug, no goodbye. I stood at the window and watched their car disappear down the drive. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the lawn. The house creaked softly in the silence. I cleared the table, washed the dishes, packed the roast into containers. Then I sat on the porch, wrapped in a shawl, and waited for the stars. That night, for the first time in years, I didn't dream of debts or dinners or disappointments. I dreamed of Tuscany, and I smiled. The first thing I unpacked in the cottage was my kettle. Not the framed photos, not the bedding, not even the box marked important papers, just the kettle. I unwrapped it from its towel cocoon, set it on the stove, and stood in silence as the soft click of the flame roared to life. This would be my first cup of tea in my new life. The cottage wasn't grand. It was, in truth, a little shabby. The porch leaned slightly to the left, the floorboards creaked in 3 distinct places, and the wallpaper peeled at the corners like it was trying to escape. But it had a soul. A small stone path led to the dunes just beyond the backyard, where the sea shimmered like a promise. The air smelled of brine and lavender, and at night I could hear waves breaking softly in the distance. It was mine. Fully, wholly, legally, emotionally mine. Moving day had been quiet. No family photos, no gaggle of grandchildren tugging at my sleeves. Just Dora, a small U-Haul, and a few local movers who whistled cheerfully as they carried in boxes. I didn't cry. Not then. Not when I closed the door to the house I'd given away piece by piece. Not even when I handed the young couple the keys. But that first night in the cottage, I wept. Not for the old house, not for the lost friendships or the betrayal. I wept for the woman I'd been, the one who clung to the fantasy of being needed, of being central, of being good enough to be loved through her giving. She was gone now, and what remained was quieter, but firmer. The phone didn't ring much those first few weeks. I'd told Dora where I was, but no one else. Not Brennan, not Sylvia. Not any of the women from church or the neighbors who had once borrowed my casserole dishes and never returned them. What surprised me most wasn't their absence. It was how little I missed them. Sylvia had worked fast, as I knew she would. Word trickled in from Dora. She'd spun a story about how I liquidated the family home for selfish reasons. That I'd abandoned the grandchildren. That I was unwell. The narrative was well polished. She even cried at brunch, apparently, wiped her eyes delicately, and said I'd changed. She wasn't wrong, but not in the way she meant. I'd changed in the quiet. In the mornings spent watching the tide roll in, and the evenings spent painting the sky with the colors of freedom. I'd changed in the absence of noise, of guilt, of manipulation. I was no longer orbiting someone else's chaos. I was finally at the center of my own life. The cottage itself was a small marvel. 2 bedrooms, a fireplace that groaned and popped when lit, a clawfoot tub that took forever to fill but made me feel like royalty. I painted the guest room a soft sage green and turned it into a studio. My watercolors lined the walls, clumsy at first, then steadier, more confident. I joined the library's Tuesday book circle. The women there were kind, a bit nosy, but sincere. They asked about my life and didn't flinch when I told them the truth. I used to live for my son. Now I live for myself. One of them, a widow named Joyce, gripped my hand and said, "Good, it's about damn time." On Thursdays, I attended watercolor classes at the community center. I wasn't the best student, but I loved every minute. I painted shells, waves, driftwood. I painted a still life of the old kettle on my porch. I even painted a version of the house I sold, only in the painting, it sat empty, its windows hollow. The financial freedom was surreal. I could buy the good butter without squinting at price tags. I bought a mattress that didn't creak. I hired a young man named Liam to repair the garden fence and taught myself how to prune the rosebush beside the porch. I found that I liked silence. Not the kind that comes from loneliness, but the kind that comes from peace. One afternoon, I sat on the porch, feet tucked under a blanket, sketching the horizon. The sea was calm that day, a soft blue-gray. My phone buzzed once beside me. Brennan. His name lit up the screen. I didn't answer. Instead, I placed the phone face down and added a seagull to my painting. Later that evening, I listened to the voicemail. "Hey, Mom, it's me. I heard about the house sale. I guess you're moved out by now. I don't know where you are. Sylvia said some things, but I don't know what's true anymore. I just wanted to talk. That's all. Just talk." I replayed it once, not because I was tempted to call back, but because I wanted to hear the sound of my son's voice without hearing my own name twisted into obligation. I poured a glass of wine, lit a candle, took my dinner out onto the porch, and ate while watching the sun slip into the sea. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty for choosing myself. Not even a little. The call came on a Wednesday evening. It had been raining since dawn, a steady, unyielding sort of rain that made the cottage feel more like a sanctuary than ever. I'd spent the day painting the sea through my bedroom window, thick gray strokes layered with green. The wind had knocked over one of my planters, and the old kettle on the stove hummed its usual lullaby. When the phone rang, I almost didn't pick up, but I saw the name, Brennan, and for a reason I couldn't explain, I answered. There was no small talk. "Mom," he said, and his voice sounded worn down to the threadbare edge of a man unraveling. "She left." I didn't speak. "Sylvia, she took the kids and moved to Arizona, packed up while I was at work and left a note on the fridge." His voice cracked on the word fridge, like it wasn't just the loss of a wife. It was the loss of routine, of a familiar mug next to the sink, of children's drawings on the door and the scent of rosemary chicken on Sunday nights. "She said she was tired of living poor," he said. "Tired of waiting for life to start. Said I wasn't ambitious enough, not connected enough. Said I didn't fight hard enough to give her what she wanted." I closed my eyes. "She's already dating someone else," he added. "Some real estate guy with money. He's got a Tesla and a house with a pool. The kids love it there." It was Sylvia's dream, I thought bitterly. The pool she tried to build on my dime, now handed to her by someone else. Someone she hadn't bled dry first. "I'm sorry, Brennan," I said softly. He laughed, dry, hollow. "Yeah, me too." Then silence. "I'm working 2 jobs now," he continued. "A prep cook during the day. I drive for a ride app in the evenings. I sleep in 5-hour shifts and eat ramen in the car. I don't know how I got here, Mom. I swear I don't." "You used people who loved you," I wanted to say. "You called it survival, but it was convenience. You let yourself become something small." "I see the kids on alternate weekends," he said. "Sylvia lets me FaceTime them sometimes. Toby asked if Grandma could come visit." I swallowed hard. I didn't know what to say. More silence. Then, "I'm not calling to ask for money," he said quickly. "I swear, I need to get out of the city. I need some space, some air. I was wondering, could I come visit just for a few days?" His voice didn't carry the old tone of expectation. No subtle manipulation, no smug presumption. It sounded like something rare, sincere. I looked out the window. The tide was receding, pulling kelp and broken shells away from the shore. "You can come?" I said. His exhale was audible, long and trembling. "Thank you. Thank you, Mom. But listen to me," I added, and my voice shifted. Firmer now. "This isn't a visit like the ones before. This isn't a return to how things were." "I know," he said. "No, I don't think you do," I said. "You're welcome here, but you're coming as a guest, not as someone looking to be saved. I'm not your emergency contact anymore. I'm your mother, that's all." He said nothing. "I'm willing to rebuild something," I continued, "but only if it's honest. If you come to this house, you come without lies. You come with humility. You come as a man who wants to be my son, not my debtor." "I understand," he said quietly. "And you don't ask me for anything," I said. "Not advice, not money, not a place to stay indefinitely. You ask only for time, and I'll give you that. I don't deserve this." I softened slightly. "Maybe not, but I'll give it anyway." He arrived on Saturday. His car was old now, scratched, dusty. He stepped out in jeans that sagged at the knees and a windbreaker I recognized from high school. He looked smaller than I remembered, less like a man and more like a shadow of one. He brought a single duffel bag and a crumpled paperback with a cracked spine. I didn't hug him right away. I let him come in, take off his shoes, breathe in the scent of rosemary and lemon from the simmering pot on the stove. I offered him tea. He accepted it. We sat on the porch, each with a mug in our hands, watching the waves roll in beneath a gray sky. "I don't know how to talk to you," he admitted. "That's a start," I said. "I used to think you were just always there, like the house, like the fridge. I didn't think of you as someone with a breaking point. I was. You just never saw the cracks." He looked down at his mug. "I see them now." We walked the beach later that evening. He asked questions about the cottage, about my art, about the book club. He didn't ask about the money, not once. At night, I made up the guest bed with the quilt Dylan's mother had sewn decades ago. Brennan touched the edge of it with a kind of reverence. "I forgot what warmth felt like," he said. I didn't reply. The next day, he helped fix the porch railing. We didn't talk much while we worked, but it felt honest. It felt real. And as he left, he paused at the gate. "Thank you for letting me come," he said. I nodded. "Be well, Brennan." And as he drove away, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long, long time. Hope, not for things to go back, but for something new, something better. It didn't happen overnight. In fact, if someone had told me a year ago, standing there at that picnic, swallowing back tears after being called a parasite, that I'd ever speak to Brennan again without bitterness rising like bile in my throat, I would have laughed. Or cried. Or both. But time, in all its quiet cruelty, also has a way of softening things. Not erasing them. No, never that. But sanding down the jagged edges so you can at least reach out without bleeding. The calls started coming once a week, always in the evening, always when the sky outside my window had begun to blush pink and lavender. I came to expect them the way one might expect the tide, predictable, steady, comforting in a way I hadn't known I needed. And he changed. It wasn't dramatic. There were no grand apologies, no rehearsed speeches, but he listened now. Not just to me, but to himself. His own voice was less defensive, more rooted. He spoke in sentences that weren't veiled requests or guilt-laced traps. "I don't know who I was back then," he said once. "I thought I was a good man, a good son. But I see it now. I was just a man who got really good at pretending." He didn't ask for money, not once. Instead, he asked about art techniques, about budgeting, about how I had managed to survive losing Dad without losing myself. And when I offered advice, he took it, not with the resentment of a man being lectured, but with the gratitude of a student who finally understood the lesson mattered. I'm trying to teach the kids responsibility, he said during one call. We made a chart, chores, homework, screen time. It's messy, but it's working. I smiled so wide it hurt. You'd be proud of Toby, he added. He told me he wants to be a problem solver when he grows up. I asked why, and he said, because problems don't go away unless someone cares enough to fix them. I bit back tears. That was Brennan's son, all right. A piece of the boy I'd once raised, reborn in the next generation. He visited twice more. The second visit, he brought the kids, just for a day. Sylvia had reluctantly agreed to the trip, provided they return before Sunday dinner with her mother. She didn't come, of course. She hadn't spoken to me in nearly a year, and I considered that one of life's quieter blessings. Her silence had once felt like rejection. Now, it felt like freedom. She could tell whatever stories she wanted. She could continue her crusade of slander and spin. There would always be someone willing to believe her. But I no longer had to respond, defend, or absorb any of it. I had stepped out of that storm and shut the door behind me. When Brennan arrived with the kids, they raced onto the porch like wind. Toby and Eliza, a whirlwind of energy and questions and sticky fingers. "This is your art?" Eliza asked, wide-eyed at my seaside paintings. "It's like magic." Brennan watched her, quiet and unsure. Later, while the kids built a sandcastle down by the water, he turned to me. "I wanted them to see this place," he said. "To see you." I nodded. "They need to know where they come from, not just from me, but from you, from your strength, your patience, your stubbornness." He smiled a little. "And your grilled cheese." We both laughed. He helped me in the garden that afternoon. We planted herbs, parsley, mint, basil. I showed him how to compost. He showed me photos from his parenting class. There was no awkwardness. Just two people, once mother and boy, now mother and man, trying to find the bridge between what was and what could be. "I can't promise I won't mess up again," he said later, sipping tea on the porch. "I don't need promises," I replied. "I need effort. And I'm giving that now," he said. "Because you're not just my mother anymore. You're someone I admire." That night, after they left, I sat with the blanket Dora had knitted for me and let the quiet settle over me like a blessing. The kids had drawn a picture before they left of my cottage, the garden, and a stick figure version of me with wild yellow hair and a big smile. It was pinned to the fridge now, in the space where memories belonged. I didn't call Dora to tell her all the details. She already knew. She had seen it in my eyes during our last book club meeting. "You're different," she'd said. "Softer, not weaker. Just healed." I wasn't healed, not completely, but I was healing, and that mattered more. As for Sylvia, she had disappeared from our lives like smoke. No phone calls, no emails, no attempts to manipulate her way back into relevance. It was almost suspicious how completely she'd vanished. But I didn't chase that silence. I let it be. Not all ghosts need exorcising. Some simply need to be ignored. And if one day she tried to reach out again? Well, I'd already written the letter in my head. Not out of anger, but out of clarity. Something like, "I hope you find the peace you tried to steal from others. I hope you learn what it means to love without taking. And I hope you understand that forgiveness does not mean return. But until that day, if it ever came, I would keep planting my garden, keep painting, keep sipping my tea in the mornings while the sea whispered secrets only the healed could hear. Because my life was mine now, fully, finally, fiercely mine." The morning light spilled through the lace curtains like soft gold, pooling on the wooden floorboards and warming the quiet air of the cottage. The kettle had just begun to sing its low, familiar hum, and a light breeze swayed the herb garden outside my kitchen window. It had been exactly 388 days since I'd left the house on Maplewood Lane. Not that I counted every day, but my journal did. One page at a time, one breath, one broken tether. I stood in front of the mirror, barefoot, wrapped in a soft robe with fraying edges. The kind of robe no one else ever saw, the kind that knew your real shape. The mirror didn't lie. It never had. It had just taken me a lifetime to stop trying to bargain with it. I saw myself fully now. Every line, every crease, every shadow. My cheeks were softer, my chin less defined, and the laugh lines around my eyes had deepened into permanent ridges. Time had carved its map across my skin, and I traced it now without flinching. In the past, I would have sighed, turned away, whispered something cruel in my own mind. Now, I looked at the woman in the glass and saw more than age. I saw her, the woman who had endured without applause, who had held an entire household on her shoulders while being called ungrateful, oversensitive, dramatic, who had fed others before feeding herself, not just at the table, but in every room of her life. The woman who was no longer anyone's puppet. Not Sylvia's, not Brennan's, not even the guilt-ridden shadow of herself she used to mistake for a good mother. That old version of me, the one who scrambled to be enough, to be wanted, to be loved in crumbs, had been quietly buried under every phone call unanswered, every check unsigned, every boundary drawn like a line in stone. And what rose in her place was someone new, someone sovereign. I reached up and tucked a stray strand of silver hair behind my ear. It glinted in the light like a thread of steel. I had built something for myself here, in this cottage. Not a mansion, not a castle, but a life. The studio in the back room smelled of paint and cedar. My easel stood facing the window, where the sea horizon cut a sharp blue line through every canvas. I'd finished 6 full paintings since spring. One of the beach at dusk, another of Brennan's children laughing in the surf. There were books on every surface, cookbooks, novels, dog-eared poetry collections. I had begun writing again, too. Quiet essays, pieces about motherhood and silence and reclaiming things you didn't even know were stolen. I taught watercolor once a week at the community center now. Joyce had insisted I do it. "You don't have to be the best," she'd said. "You just have to be willing." Willing. Yes. That word lived on my tongue now like a seed. I was willing to start over, to try badly, to be seen. I had a routine: tea at 7, painting until 10, walks along the dunes after lunch, weekly visits to the farmer's market, Sunday calls with Brennan, sometimes short, sometimes long, never loaded with shame. He still carried the weight of his mistakes. I saw it in his face, in the pauses between his words. But he no longer placed that weight on me. He carried it like a man trying to build something honest. He asked questions now, real ones. What do you think makes a good father? How do you know when it's time to let something die? Did you always feel invisible, or did it happen slowly? And I answered him, carefully, honestly, as an equal. He had never once asked to move in, had never hinted at needing money. In fact, during our last call, he said something that echoed in my mind every time I stood in front of this mirror. "You gave me everything, Mom. And the best thing you ever gave me was finally telling me no." I smiled at the thought now, my reflections softening at the edges. A letter had come from Sylvia months ago, nothing dramatic, just 3 lines scrawled in rigid handwriting. "I regret some things. I know you won't answer. But I wanted to say it. That's all." I had read it once, folded it, burned it in the fireplace that night. Not out of anger, but because I'd already said everything I needed to with my silence. Sylvia was gone. Whatever storm she had tried to stir in my life had passed, and I had no intention of reopening the door to rain. Instead, I filled my days with color, with rosemary in the garden, with cardamom scones in the oven, with conversations at the book club that lingered long past the last page, with the breath of peace so quiet I hadn't realized how desperately I'd needed it until I tasted it. I no longer checked my bank account with dread. I had enough. Enough to live, enough to rest, enough to say yes to myself. I was not wealthy, but I was rich. Rich in time, in stillness, in space that belonged solely to me. I looked again into the mirror, and for the first time in my life, I whispered something I had never dared to say aloud. You belong to no one but yourself. And that wasn't lonely. It was liberation. I turned away from the mirror, stepped into the warmth of the kitchen, and poured myself a cup of tea. Outside, the sea shimmered under the morning sun. I opened the door. The wind wrapped around me, not cold, but bracing, honest. And I stepped into the day, not as a mother, not as a provider, not as a wound walking, but as a woman. A woman fully awake, fully hers. This was not the end of my story. This was the beginning of my story, the real one. And finally, it was mine.